Hi, everyone. I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. This weekend, newsroom nonprofit ProPublica released a bombshell report showing Project 2025 training videos that have severe implications for the future of our democracy. It touches on the Freedom of Information Act and our justice system. And here to explain what it all means for the future of our democracy is Skye Perryman. She is the president and CEO of Democracy Forward. Skye, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So there's a lot of news to discuss, and I know President Biden also recently released a series of proposals to reform the Supreme Court. But let's start with the newest news, which is Project 2025. What do these videos and what does this platform say about our courts and the Justice Department, and what does it mean for the state of our country?
Well, Project 2025 is an extreme series of proposals. It would seek to take away from the American people things that they have come to rely on: an independent Justice Department, that will protect the American people and protect the advancement of their rights. Quality public education for all students, not just for people that can afford expensive private schools. Climate protections and the weather service. All of these things, from soup to nuts, are embedded within Project 2025, which is really a proposal to dismantle the way that our federal system works and to dismantle numerous benefits for people and communities across the country. You've seen this in the media. There have been a lot of people hemming and hawing about saying, Project 2025 is just a proposal, that there aren't political actors who are interested in it, that certain candidates are seeking to distance themselves from it. But the videos that broke over the weekend and the reporting that broke continues to confirm what we have long known, which is that there is a concerted effort among very far-right groups that is being supported by an ecosystem that has supported far-right political leaders, that is seeking to undermine benefits for people and communities across the country and our democracy as a whole.
Now, as you explain all this, I have to wonder, you learn in grade school about the system of checks and balances. So I don't know if this is a simplistic question, but Skye, are there checks and balances in place in government right now that could prevent some of these extreme policies from going through?
Well, a number of the policies that are proposed are not only detrimental and harmful, they're unlawful. And so our courts are supposed to be a check to that. Unfortunately, over the past few years, the courts have become more and more politicized by the same far right movement that is behind Project 2025. We've seen that with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. By the way, the same organizations that were involved in the overturning of Roe versus Wade are part of Project 2025. The same political leaders who appointed justices, like former President Trump, that have voted to overturn Roe v. Wade are associated with this broader ecosystem. And so we do have checks and balances, and they should work. But unfortunately, our Supreme Court is at a place where it's very hard for many people to see that it would provide that proper check.
The reporting that emerged this weekend from ProPublica took us inside Project 2025, and some of the policies being proposed included getting around Freedom of Information Act disclosures, ensuring that conservative policies aren't struck down by quote unquote left-wing judges. And a lot of this might sound really procedural to the average American. So what would be the effect to just regular Main Street if some of this went through?
Well, the effect would be detrimental. I mean, this is a proposal that is seeking to do everything from banning medication abortion to dismantling our public schools to threatening overtime pay for millions of American workers. And what you see in those training videos and what you see in the overall plan that has been developed for some time is a range of people who do not believe that they are accountable to the American people, who do not respect our Constitution, and who want to proceed as if they are above the law.
What is Democracy Forward doing in response to these videos and in response to the proposals within Project 2025?
Well, Democracy Forward, we want to make sure that this country works and serves all people. And so the first thing that your viewers can do is go to our website at democracyforward.org and download the People's Guide to Project 2025, which does exactly what you've asked here. It breaks it down so that people can understand what is going on, who is behind it, and how it would affect their daily lives. But we're litigators, and we go to court and we make sure that people and communities have good representation. And so we are, along with many others, are preparing legal responses in order to challenge this very harmful behavior and activity should that be needed. In states like Florida and Texas today, a number of the policies that you see in Project 2025, whether it's banning books or banning abortion, we see those already playing out in the states, and our team is on the ground with people and communities seeking to have them use their tools to push back.
As your team is on the ground in these communities, how aware are they of these videos of Project 2025? Do you think the general public is as up to speed on everything it says as perhaps you are?
Well, maybe not as perhaps as people that look at it every day, but Project 2025 is something that the American people are rejecting. Large swaths of the American public are understanding what it is. They're rejecting it, which is why you find a lot of people disingenuously trying to act as if they don't know where it came from or who put it forward. You see that with former President Trump. You see that with a lot of his associates trying to say we don't have anything to do with this. Whereas when you compare, when you compare actually the people behind Project 2025, the authors, and a list of who served in the prior administration, you're going to find a lot of overlap there. So we want to make sure that people and communities do know what's at stake, and that's what will continue to be our focus. But we are encouraged that people are making their voices heard, that they do not accept this extremism. And actually, the fact that you find political actors seeking to distance themselves from these proposals disingenuously shows you that there is no mandate for this extremism.
You use the word extreme, and when you talk about something like proposing that public schools are disbanded, it sounds extreme to the level of almost a dystopian fiction novel. And my question is, for someone who hears like overtime pay could go away or public schools could go away, and they say that is insane, that could never happen here. What is your response to the "it could never happen here" argument?
Many people thought that it could never happen, that the Supreme Court just 2 years ago in 2022 overturned a constitutional right for more than half of this country. And so we see that this extremism is not academic. It's not a fiction. This isn't the sky is falling. This is actually real implications. In the prior administration, a number of the policies that we see in Project 2025, regulations that would allow healthcare providers to not provide healthcare to people in need if the healthcare provider disagrees with the type of care the person needs, regulations that reverse progress on civil rights and LGBTQ rights, regulations that help support labor and support our workforce. We saw a number of those under attack and had to take the prior administration to court to stop that extremism. And so this is not something that is academic or fictional. It's part of a real set of policy proposals that are actually taking that have actually taken hold in states like Florida and Texas already, and that could take hold of our entire country.
Now, you talk about policy proposals, which is a good transition to President Biden. It is not just the Republican Party that is proposing changes to our court. President Biden, at the end of July, released 3 policy changes, proposals to the Supreme Court. And Skye, can you just break down what he is proposing?
Sure. President Biden issued a real historic call for court reform. And one thing that it's important for us to all understand is that the United States Constitution does provide those checks and balances and enables the American people and their elected representatives to reform the courts, to shape much of what our court system looks like in order to meet the needs of the American people and to ensure that judicial actors, that judges are just as accountable as presidents and as other members course, other elected representatives. And so President Biden has proposed 3 of those reforms. One is a constitutional amendment that would say that no president is above the law. That was something we were all taught in grade school, so it sort of should go without saying. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court this last term issued a decision in Trump versus United States that calls that into question. And you'll recall that is where we heard Justice Sotomayor even saying, with fear for democracy, she dissented from that opinion. And so President Biden is asking for a constitutional amendment that would restore what we all know, which is that in this country, no one, not even the president, is above the law. We're not a country of kings and queens. On that note, President Biden also is proposing term limits for Supreme Court justices, understanding that we don't have kings and queens in this country, that there are term limits for the president, that members of Congress have to run for office every 2 or 6 years, depending on if they're in the House or the Senate, that judges should have some form of term limit as well. The Supreme Court should have some sort of term limit as well. And so he's proposing 18-year term limits and a fairness, a way of rebalancing the court where every president gets to appoint justices when they are president, so that you don't have a court that ends up being unbalanced as a result of one president of one political party getting to appoint a bunch of justices and another president of another political party not getting to appoint any. So that's a rebalancing. And then he's also calling for an enforceable code of ethics. This is another one of these things that many people, I think, that go about their daily lives would assume that the Supreme Court of the United States, that individuals who interpret our Constitution, who have the power to overturn our constitutional rights as they have done, are subject to a code of ethics, just like lawyers and just like many of us in the country are. But there's actually no enforceable code of ethics, independently enforceable code of ethics that applies to the Supreme Court. And President Biden is proposing to fix that as well.
Now, these, of course, are proposals. So what is the likelihood that this becomes actual law, policy, procedure for the Supreme Court? What has to happen?
Well, Congress has to act on some of them. And then, of course, with a constitutional amendment, there has to be a ratification throughout the country in the states. What's important to know, though, is that in this moment, the favorability rating of the U.S. Supreme Court is near historic lows, and it has remained there for some time. That is a real concern for democracy and for our freedoms. It's a concern for how our country operates, because we are a country of law and not of people. And so these reforms, we know a lot of people will support.
A lot of people will support, but what is the likelihood of this getting through a very divided Congress?
Well, right now, we know that the members of Congress, the Republican members of Congress, are doing everything they can to try to keep the court stacked in their favor and to try to avoid these reforms.
So your assessment is it's unlikely.
I think if you're talking about what happens in August after the August recess, I don't think that the House of Representatives, led by Speaker Johnson, is necessarily going to fully ratify. However, what I will say is that we see tremendous support among people for reforms in ways that we've never seen in the United States before, because of the understanding that people are having on a day-by-day basis. There's more reports, more justices have taken gifts, have not disclosed them. The court is operating clearly in furtherance of an agenda that is contrary to how many of us were taught the Constitution is supposed to function. And so I am optimistic that this is a real issue that can mobilize people and that can mobilize elected representatives.
That's interesting. So do you see this being a motivating issue for voters when they go to the polls in November?
Well, what we know is that voters are prioritizing things like reproductive health care and abortion access, gun safety. They're prioritizing the economy. These are all issues that voters care about. And when they understand that these issues are the types of things that the courts look at and shape on a daily basis, when they make that connection between issues and courts, the courts matter a lot in how they want their elected representatives to prioritize these issues and in how they vote.
maybe not to put too fine a point on it, but you talk about those issues, and then we're talking about things like term limits for Supreme Court judges. And I wonder, if you just hear term limits for Supreme Court judges, I, as a regular person, might think that has nothing to do with me. What's your response to that?
Well, we know that rebalancing the justice system, making it a system that we can all believe in, one that is in service of checks and balances, is really important to all of us. Many of us have our rights on that court docket every single term. And it is important for people to understand that, and to understand that our Constitution provides tools that we, the people, can use in order to make sure that our justice system serves all of us. An inspiring thing that's happened recently, and I have the privilege of getting to be involved in it, is an initiative called Moms for a Fair Court, which are moms that are across the country, women who are going about their daily lives, raising their kids, going to work, taking care of their families, being active in their communities, are mobilizing around the need for a fair court, because they're seeing they don't want their kids to have less rights than they did when they were growing up. They don't want their kids to continue to have to go to school for fear of gun violence, when we have the Supreme Court continuing to strike down a number of legislative, of longstanding laws that protect our health and safety. And so this is really exciting, and I think encouraging, and shows the power of that mobilization.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to watching that evolve. Skye Perryman, thank you so much for coming here and telling us all about Moms for Justice, Project 2025, and the proposed changes to the court. We'll have to have you back once Congress is back in session and we can watch all of this unfold through the fall.
Great to see you, Maggie.